Coming up on The Returned.
I went into quarantine, didn't know whether I would see my husband again. My cardiovascular system was failing. My neurological system was failing. I surrendered. I let go of the worrying, the fretting, the grasping. I was in and out of my body. This presence entered my experience. I didn't go into the light. I did not see any light, but I saw myself outside of myself. And I felt this being.
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. The truth always follows you back. Hi, and welcome to The Returned, a place where we share near-death stories, out-of-body experiences, spiritual awakenings, signs from spirit, and the journeys of healers and light workers from around the world. Today, we sit with Cassidy, a biochemist turned mystic, whose near-death experience cracked open her perception and led her into a deeper exploration of consciousness. Crystal, welcome to The Return.
Thank you for having me. Excited to chat with you today.
Oh, you're so very welcome. Crystal, before we get to the heart of the conversation, I always like to ground the audience in who you were before your experience. And I also like to find out if religion or spirituality played any role in your life at that time.
Yeah, before my near-death experience, I was developing my spirituality. I had a Kundalini awakening or a central channel activation when I was probably about 5 years prior to that event. So I was already on this acceleration as far as spirituality and consciousness was concerned. But I was very much in between two worlds at the time. The biotech world, a life as I had known it up until that point, and was a very scientific, logical, linearly minded person who was starting to wake up and was practicing. And I've been meditating for a long time. Since I was a kid, I had a meditation practice because I did martial arts since I was 12 years old. That was a huge part of my life. I was on the US team for a bit. And so I was already getting familiar with the mechanism of mind. But the near-death experience accelerated all of that and kind of stopped things quite literally in their tracks as far as my life trajectory, so that I had the space to really connect with what my purpose was, because I was confused before that happened.
We all were, weren't we? So as your life unfolded, something happened, and that shifted everything. So a moment that uninterrupted, I should say, the path that you were on and brought you face to face with something beyond what you thought was possible. Is that safe to say?
Oh, for sure. Yes. Beyond what I thought was possible. And there's something about the intensity of the experience really pushing you beyond what you thought you were capable of experiencing. And there's, in any near-death experience, I am sure, there is that discomfort. There is that you're coming right up against your fears, your worst fears, really. And there's something powerful about that experience. And even though I don't wish it on anybody, I'm deeply grateful for having that container that showed me what was possible.
Absolutely, I agree. I felt the exact same way when I had mine. Now, Crystal, I'd love for you to take us into that moment of your life.
Happy to. So I was working in biotech. Like I said, it was 2020. You can imagine what was going on. The virus was starting to make its rounds around the world. And there was a very specific moment where I was on the phone with the director of a medical institution in the Bay Area. trying to figure out messaging about testing and what we were going to do. And this was before we really had any idea of what was going on. We knew there was a virus. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know how to treat it. There were no vaccines, all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of unknown. And I remember being on the phone with him and I could feel myself getting sick in that moment. And I had this sense of very odd sense of knowing that I was in for it. And it was a very heavy karmic feeling. Like I knew there was no running from this experience and I knew it all at one time. Very odd. And I can't say that I've experienced that sensation any other time in my life. And before that, I had been in a meditative intensive teacher training the month before. And in those meditations, before this had happened, I started having premonitions of something coming. And I started to connect with, and this will sound also a little bit out there, a past life of mine or simultaneous life of mine. And I was starting to see him more and more in my meditations. And there was something about that lifetime that was connected to what it was I was going to be going through. I didn't totally understand it at the time. I understood it deeper as I went through the experience itself and afterwards. But I could see this wall, this wave of something coming. And that whatever was going on in that lifetime and what I was about to go through were karmic. They were tied, something energetically. So I was aware of that. I was like, whew, I was trying to make sense of it. I was painting the scenes that I was seeing in my mind to try and understand what this was. But then as I got sicker and sicker and lockdown initiated, I knew enough being in biotech what to look out for. So I was lucky in that way as far as my scientific knowledge. And so I knew that when my lungs started feeling hot and then cold and then stiff in cycles where it felt like bricks were stacking up on my chest, I knew that I was in trouble at that point, and I knew that's what people died of. And so luckily we got to the hospital. I went into quarantine, didn't know whether I would see my husband again, which was one of the most difficult experiences to go through. He couldn't come with me. And on top of that, the doctors did not know what to do. And they were asking me, do you want to try this drug? Do you want to, we don't know, right? So, and I had a moment when I was just utterly exhausted. My cardiovascular system was failing. My neurological system was failing. That I knew there was no figuring this out. There was no logic or equation or even a drug that was going to save me. And so I had a moment where I surrendered in a way that I had never previously experienced, and everything happened at one time. So there wasn't a conscious choice to surrender. It felt like it came from my higher self, if that makes sense. Something like came forward. I let go of all the resistance, which was the worrying, the fretting, the grasping. And as that dissolved, this is why surrender, I think, is such a powerful, potent medicine. And I understand it more deeply now. Once that dissolved, there was nothing between me and source anymore. And so I was in and out of my body. I was having a hard time staying in my body energetically. That took me about another year to really, after all this happened, to integrate coming back into my body. But as I released, I also felt myself ask for help. And it came from my higher mind, something behind my conscious mind. And as I asked for help, the help was given. And it all happened at one time. And this presence entered my experience. I didn't go into the light. I did not see any light, but I saw myself outside of myself. And I felt this being interacting with me both energetically and physically. So I still had a sensation of my body at the time. And this being was seeing me in a way that is something that you can't unexperience once you've been seen so completely. And I don't know if I would call this being God, but it was something certainly in the realm of that possibility, maybe an ascended master, an angel. I have some ideas of maybe who it was, but it was powerful. And it started to work on my energy body. First with my first center, so I physically could feel it as well. Then my third eye, so the space between my eyebrows, and then my heart space. So it went like bing, 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 and everything was lit up. And I was kind of suspended in the experience for a while. And I knew that I was going to be okay, that I was going to continue. I was also very aware that there was a path where I left. I could feel both paths. And I chose to stay. It took me a while to figure out why I chose to stay, because I didn't think I had a fear of death necessarily. So I had to figure that out after. And the other thing I'll mention about this, and I don't know if you experienced this as well, but I could feel death as an energy in my space. And to me, it felt like this weirdly familiar old friend that I had forgotten about, and was surprised that it showed up at my door. But I knew it at the same time. It was familiar. Like, oh, we've done this before. I know this energy. And so that was very interesting to me, to feel death as an experience, as an energy, as something that was familiar. And not necessarily in a scary way, in a very potent, present, powerful way. And so I slowly started to recover, and as I did, I continued to have these metaphysical experiences. And I'll share maybe one of those, which is that once I could walk again, I was able to walk onto our fire escape on the bottom level of our apartment. And I walked outside, sat in our chair, and looked up at the sky, and had such a profound moment of presence. It was so simple. I was like, what was that? I thought about it for years afterwards. It was so simple, but it was so etched in my mind. And I was in a meditation about a year ago, a 3-hour meditation, and I found myself projected into space and time, across space and time. And I landed on that fire escape with my past self. And it was me looking at myself in that chair. And I realized that experience was actually across space and time. I was feeling myself. There was a communication happening between my future and my past. That's what I was feeling. And so I have a whole new appreciation now for what healing can be, and it can be you in another space and time, not necessarily even another being. And so that was a pretty cool experience.
You had one heck of an experience, didn't you? I'm sure it wasn't all good, but
it was tough. Yeah, for sure.
I think at that time, a lot of us did get very, very sick, didn't we?
Yeah.
How did we return to your body? How did you return to your body?
A good question. It took time. There were portions of me that returned over time. And there was a weird, for me, it was a little bit of a weird experience going through the grief of coming back fully into my body. And that grief was due to feeling so expansive. So my energy it wanted to hang up. It wanted to be up here. it didn't really want to come back down into a very broken body, which took about a year to be able to do most normal things again. And so I had to do a lot of energetic work. I worked with the breath a lot, meditation a lot, the ability to sit with pain and to be okay in that discomfort. And I learned through that, which was such a gift, and it still blows my mind to this day, that pain is energetic, and it can dissolve and evaporate and move. And it's such a teacher, and suffering is such a teacher. And that if you have the courage, and sometimes we're not given any other choice, but it does take courage to have faith. And so that was my mantra, faith over fear, for that year. And I had to go back to the basics, had to go back to the simple things of just, okay, I'm starting to get up in my head. I am depressed, or I have anxiety, or I'm fainting in the hallways and having to crawl my way to a neighbor's door. It was very vulnerable. It required the whole community to really help me recover, whether that was just lending your ear, physically dropping me off food. I had to, after being such a driven person and an athlete, to accept help. That was the other thing that helped me come back into my body, was knowing that I was supported in ways that were physical, in ways that were not. And that was a huge part. But I credit breath work with a big part of rewiring my nervous system so that my energy could come back into my body fully.
Why do you feel you needed to have that experience, aside from the obvious? Yes, you were sick, and we know how that ended, but why? Because it seems like there is something that needed to happen in that time for you.
Yeah, I love the question. I've sat with that a lot. And I think that the answer to the question is, we may not ever fully understand why. And I'm okay with that. I think from what I do understand, and of course I've thought about, could I have gotten to where I'm at without having that experience? I don't know the answer. I would assume probably not. Because once you see behind that veil and you confront your fears in such a powerful way, there's just no going back. You are forever changed. And so I think one of the reasons, I do think that there's a few elements of life that are predestined or planned upon. And I think that if that had not happened, it may have taken me more time to figure out what my purpose was. And I may have dabbled in between two worlds for longer than I needed to. Because what that did is it wiped my slate clean. Anything that I was working on that was no longer aligned cleared out in that year. I had space. I had space to be, and I'm very lucky to have that space, to be creative, to start thinking about how do I want to spend my time? I'm very clear now that I'm here for a reason. I've seen the other side. What am I going to do with that? And so you can't help, and it's cliche, but you can't help but be much more clear on the preciousness of life, the shortness, the brevity, the opportunity that we have in being here. And so there is a fire that's lit under you in a way after that of I'm not going to waste my time. I want to balance both being here. I like to view life as a glorious vacation. And I like to think of it as the an experiment to expand and to connect and to see how much of your soul that you can bring into this dimension of space and time. And so I think I got a lot of clarity through that experience, which I don't know how I would have gotten otherwise.
It also sounds like you had been slowed right down.
Yeah.
In order for someone, the being, to come in. Do you think that being was there just to help you with your sickness?
Ooh, got to chill on that. I think they were not there just to help with my sickness. I think they were there to demonstrate to me what's possible when you surrender, when you get out of the way. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had access to that the whole time, but I was in my own way. So that couldn't come through. And as soon as that barrier dissolved, it allowed that support. It allowed that interdimensional experience. And so we have that barrier, this ego, if you want to call it that, the grasping analytical mind for a purpose, and we can use it in this incarnation glorious ways. But I think after that, I knew that there were limitations to that. In fact, huge limitations to it. And if I could start to work with that consciously and be able to practice getting out of my own way, dissolving that barrier, my gosh, like what else is possible? So it ignited pretty massive curiosity of directly experiencing a healing, an interdimensional, highly intelligent being. And I think that understanding surrender is falling back into life rather than like forcing your way into it.
That's got to be one of my favorite words, surrender. I'm not sure I understand it the same way you do. But when I was going through my NDE, the NDE, I remember there was a point in the time when I had to just surrender. It's almost like a feeling. Well, what it felt like for me was that it came over, and I knew, my body just knew, my soul knew that there was just like this. You just couldn't, can't fight it, And so surrender, I got just such goosebumps right now. So it became one of my favorite words, and it means something so positive for me. And as I'm listening to you, you're using it almost in the same context. It's a very positive experience for you.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, if more people surrendered, what would the world be like? That's where it takes my brain.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. I think that we can...
Surrender means one thing, but what does it really mean? Especially
what does it really mean?
Experiences like yours,
Yeah, I think we have a misconception around the word surrender as giving over power or giving up. And it's so not that. It's actually giving yourself over to a power that's beyond your perception. And it requires courage to do that.
Yes. Big time, doesn't it?
Big time. Yeah.
It just goes through all the way up my neck now. We're talking truth here. I can feel it, right? So I wanted to step back just for a moment, and then I'm going to circle back to that, because I wanted to get kind of a feeling of what it felt like for you being out of your body for the first time. But at the same time, you were not really a believer in this at that time, were you?
That's a good question. Had started to see beyond the veil before that. I had some experiences, metaphysical in nature. I'd had some ET contact experiences, deep experiences of presence and meditation. So I was open, but I was not aware of that possibility. I hadn't been out of my body before I had started to perceive ghosts and other disembodied consciousness, which I didn't grow up perceiving. It just kind of evolved. And so I was very curious about what was going on here and trying to understand it. But there is something liberating about being outside of yourself. First of all, it's a direct knowing, which nobody can take away from you, that you are not your body. That is profound. After this happened, I'm sure you feel this way too, is I wanted to go tell everybody and be like, do you realize that you're not your body? This is huge. Like, this is the biggest thing for our species to understand, is that we're not limited to this dimension of experience. We are interdimensional beings. And so experiencing that and experiencing the simultaneous expansion of consciousness, because you're no longer relying on your human senses, the sight, smell, even communication completely changes, right? This is why I believe telepathy is just a natural evolution. It's a much more efficient mode of communication that we will eventually come to appreciate and understand more deeply. It's a completely different dimensional experience. And so I can't unsee that. I think that whenever I get a little weighed down in this life with like the daily experience, and it's always kind of there, right over my shoulder of, well, this isn't all there is. And so what can that mean for us, and what more can we experience? That's being in that astral. I don't even know if it is the astral. It was like beyond the astral. There's just multiple layers to it. And I experienced a certain layer of it. And I think that there are certainly more, for sure. And probably ones that we don't yet understand at all. And so I remain very excited about seeing how much of it I can experience.
Oh my goodness, I know. So after everything you experienced, how do you now define consciousness? If it's not different, that's okay too. But would there be a change in the way you would define consciousness now?
Yes. So before this happened, I had a very scientific definition of consciousness, that neuron fires experience. There's an equation, it's algorithmic, it's reproducible, it's biologically based. And yes, the brain is this amazing computer, that can create all kinds of experiences. After experiencing what I have, my definition of consciousness is awareness, but it's this pervasive, all-knowing awareness that is always within all of us at all times. We just have different levels of realizing and connecting with that awareness, but it's always there. It's always in the background. It's connection. It's love. I think that love is just a remembrance of that connection. We become aware of it and we're like, ooh, that feels good. Yes, because it's who you are. And we call that love. And so consciousness to me is beyond foundational to this reality. It is this reality. And what we experience emerges from it. And so from a more practical perspective, I think of us in this dimension as having a biological component. Sure, neuron fires experience, that can be a component of it. But kind of like Stephen Hawking's last theory, theories lie within different theories. And there's a larger theory that lies within. And it's the field-based experience. It is the quantum-based experience. And I'm lucky enough to know some scientists that are working on this in quantum physics and neuroscience. And we're getting closer to really understanding this more so than we have. that it's not algorithmic. The brain is not a computer. It is a projector of consciousness, and that aperture can be opened further and further and further. And then we experience more and more and more of that field experience, which is foundational to this universe. And most of us have not opened the aperture, but we have the capacity to. At the same time, there's always that connection that's present. It's just various degrees. And it's like, how can we open the aperture and connect to more and more of that foundational experience, that awareness that is aware?
That was almost like music to my ears, listening to I'm silly sometimes.
I know I love it.
To step back a bit. And I wanted to see if you could describe that being to us. And I know you said you kind of know who it was, or you kind of think you do, or you kind of put a name on it. But I know that the audience will be wondering, who was that?
Getting another wave. Yeah, I'm pretty certain at this point that it was Paramahansa Yogananda. I can feel that's an affirmation there. I was reading his book at the time, and it was like, for me, it was like music to my ears. I was like, ooh, there's deep truth in this. And I've followed his teachings for a long time. And I think that his book entered my life right before this happened for a reason. And so that's when I really think about who that was. He's omnipresent. He's an ascended master. He's able to move between these realms in very powerful ways. And so I do think it was him, an aspect of his consciousness that met me in that liminal space.
I'm wondering if this experience changed how you show up in the world now.
That's a good question. I think it changes my relationship to fear, which could have held me back in ways, and in how I chose to show up. I just don't have that fear anymore. When you are deeply connected, and I aspire to continue to be, to who it is that you really are beyond this formation in this space and time, then a lot of the self-judgment starts to deteriorate. It can't hold on. It just can't go with you there. It can't follow you. So instead of taking elements or perceived negative elements of my experience, like self-judgment, criticism, negative self-talk, lack of confidence, anxiety, depression, any of those kind of lower level experiences, which at times I do experience, but I know I have the tools to move through it, and I know it's not who I really am. And so when you, instead of focusing on each one of those as its own thing, what I have found is that through the experience of surrender as the doorway into your higher self, those just cannot come with you. And you don't need to know the story. You don't need to know the why. It just ceases to be relevant to that level of frequency or consciousness. It just dissolves. And so I think I've been able to show up in a way that feels way more fulfilling to me, way more authentic. I think authenticity is a huge power up, if you will, since that experience is like, I just feel more connected to who it is that I really am. And I'm not too attached anymore to how I'm perceived. And so that is freeing. Like when you're not attached to that, the world opens up. Just everything gets bigger. Everything gets more possible. And creativity, I'll tell you another thing after the NDE, and I think you've experienced this too, is that creativity just wants to flow through you. It's like, ooh, I've got a vessel. I've got this connection between the higher realms of experience into this realm, and it just wants to flow. And you can finally hear it and you can finally honor it. And so creativity is another thing that I've really enjoyed and I more deeply value than I did before. I was like way more in the science world. My only real goal was to be the COO of a biotech company. And then once I was pretty much there, I was like, oh, wait, this is not it. It's such a cliche experience that people, when they get there and they have that realization, oh, it's not what you thought it was. And so it feels very, and also dealing with a lot more of the unknown of like, ooh, I don't really know exactly what's next, and being okay with that because you have the trust in your interdimensional self. So everything gets bigger.
Did you have anything that you had to unlearn in order to step in to this new way of seeing?
Great question. Such great questions. Anything I had to unlearn? I think one of the things I've really personally had to work on, I'm a Virgo. I've come from a science background. I love systems. I love to create predictability, if this, then that. And so there's still parts that love that element of experience. But I think I had to let a lot of that go, that it couldn't fully follow me. And I think I had to unlearn looking for validation outside of myself. Because when you're charting a new path that you yourself don't exactly know, but you can see through the fog on the path in front of you lights. That's what I see in my mind a lot of times. It's like, just follow the lights. And yes, it's a little foggy, but enjoy the fog. That's part of the fun. So looking to others for validation and looking to others for answers as far as, should I do this or should I do that? Is this the best thing to do? Whenever I start doing that, I have to catch myself because they don't know. You're every single one of us is charting a new path. And yes, you can learn from others, but I think looking for validation and answers from others, I have had to relearn that I have that within myself. That's why I create space in my life to connect with those answers and that knowing, because it's going to guide you so much better than anybody else's.
You mentioned that you continued having experiences. And I was wondering, along with those continued experiences, what about after effects? Did you have any after effects when you came back to your body?
A lot of physical after effects, but spiritually, much more easily able to connect with expanded states of consciousness. And an increasing relationship with interdimensional beings and awareness that seemed to accelerate in the years after that. Yeah.
I can only imagine what that would have felt like for you. I tried to actually visualize it, what it would be like. I'm wondering, do you fear death now?
I don't. I look at it as a really exciting journey that I get to go on at some point. It wasn't my time when I had my NDE, but it will be at some point. And I'm really just grateful for whatever time I do have. And I'm not too interested in worrying about that experience, even though I do understand, but having gone through what I did, I do have an understanding, appreciation for the physical body first of all. And so there's certainly elements of that transition that I'm curious about, but I also think that I'm pretty well prepared for. So I don't have a fear of death. I think my fear that was driving me to stay was my fear of not living my purpose in this lifetime. And that's a very different fear and driver and motivation. And that took me a while to understand.
Are you living your purpose now?
I believe so. Yeah. Being here with you, having these conversations, allowing creativity to flow, trusting myself, expanding as much of my soul as I can in this dimension of space and time, and having a lot of fun. Like, I am much more optimizing for joy as a teacher. I saw that in one of my meditations. It was like, suffering's no longer your teacher, joy is. And just that idea of being like, ooh, joy is my teacher. How am I going to live my life with joy as my teacher? Also challenging, because when joy becomes your teacher, you really have to pay attention to anything that's not joyful, because it's just not going to be able to live in your life. And I do feel like I'm living my purpose.
What does living fully mean to you now compared to before?
I think that, so I like to think of it in two ways. One is purpose, which I think everybody's purpose is actually the same, if I can be so bold to say. And that purpose is to experience as much of yourself as you can. I call it soul, expanded self. And how much of it can you bring into your experience through creativity, through whatever vessel means. So we all have a very similar purpose. We all have variations on our mission. Our missions can be different. Mission will shift. It's always shifting. There is no like, here's your one thing. It's authenticity is such a huge guide into that. How authentic am I being in the moment, in my life, in my relationships, in my work? How authentic can I be? Because I think that authenticity connects you with so much fulfillment. It's just, that's the way the equation works there. Authenticity is fulfillment.
For those who fear or feel something shifting, maybe within them, but don't understand it, what would you want them to know about that feeling?
Yes, one, that I understand it, that fear, because change is difficult for us in this dimension. We are in vessels that are engineered for survival. And so unless you start becoming aware of how your body, your mind, your spirit, how these mechanisms work, I don't want to say this in a way that creates more fear, but you are more living in the pattern than living in the creation. And so I understand that fear. And one of the best ways to work with fear is to just sit with it and to hear it and to let it speak to you and to go into it. And how much further can you go into it? Because I'll tell you something, one thing with very practically physical pain. So I had a lot of heart issues after my NDE. Chest pain, always thought like maybe I was dying, randomly it would come on. It could create quite a bit of fear. And so in my meditations, I said, you know what, body, like we're just going to really feel this fear. And I would sit with it for hours. And I would feel like I was going to have a heart attack in the meditation, and that my husband was going to find me and I was going to have died from a heart attack in my meditations. And I was like, I'm not letting up. Like, let's really see this for what it is. And the most miraculous thing happened, that it would just dissolve. And then another fear would come forward. My whole body was on fire because I had some nervous system issues. And everything felt like I was burning alive, like really intense. And I was like, I'm not wavering. I'm sitting with this. And I'm not saying this is easy. I'm just saying that something emerges from sitting with fear. And it evaporated. And I sat there in meditation for about 4 hours, going through all these layers of fear. And until my body gave up, I had this moment where it just trusted me. And it was like, all right, I've got you. We understand each other now. And since that happened, I can go into meditation and my body just it hangs out till I get back. It has my back. And so I have so much more trust in my body as being a miraculous vessel that is way more powerful than my biotech mind gave it credit for. And so I guess to answer that is that the fear is never as definite as you think it is. It's permeable. It moves. It will test you. But on the other side of that fear is a breakthrough every single time, without fail. So whatever the fear is, and I constantly work with this myself, but whatever that fear is, I like to go into it, and it takes courage, and it takes quite a bit of effort. But the more you understand those mechanics, the more you start to notice patterns, and you can move through it much faster. And so I would say to just get started, to know that if you give it a shot this morning and you sit with yourself for 5 minutes and all of these fearful worries come up, that's okay. That's part of you building your awareness. If you meet it every single day, you'll make progress. That's why I view coming to my cushion as it's like me taking a shot on goal with the basketball. And it's like sometimes it goes in and sometimes it doesn't. But if I'm shooting every day, I'm going to get better and better at it, and more are going to go in the hoop. And so that's how I think of it now.
Practicing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a practice.
It is, yeah.
I had the onset of heart issues that never happened again, which led me to my NDE. Yeah. So when you had mentioned that heart problems, panic, all that stuff that comes up when your heart starts beating, and the heat. So after my NDE, I guess I'll be honest, I got stuck in a little PTSD pattern because I could only think about, oh my God, I literally just died. Right. Yeah. And then later when I kind of calmed a bit from that, because every time my heart would beat, it would be like it was going to happen again. It never has happened again. And I actually seek therapy because I thought I was dying every single time. And, and this is not funny when someone's going through it, but it is now that I look back. But my therapist had said to me, can you tell me how many times did you die this? When he said that, I know, like for me, I think about it now, it's funny, but when he said it to me, I was like, oh my God, I had myself dying probably over 30 times.
Yeah.
And then when you actually looked at it and said, well, what really happened out of it? It was like, oh, wow, I didn't die, but in the moment you were dying. So I understand and empathize with that feeling. And I know it's really, really hard for people to get out of. It's so hard.
It's so hard. And you're wired for that survival. And so the brain is throwing all kinds of things at you. Like alert, something's wrong, the system's off. And I think that alert system, and there's science to back this up after a traumatic event like that, is that system is malfunctioning afterwards. That's part of the trauma that you have to work with, which is so hard. So I very much feel you. I had a very similar experience. You can't help but experience that, because the body thinks that, well, we survived this, but just barely. And so that's the loop that's continuing to play. And it takes a lot to interrupt that loop and bring you back to baseline and homeostasis. And the nervous system is pretty shot at that point. It's a rewiring that has to happen. And I wish that there was more resources for people after those experiences, because I truly had nowhere to go other than maybe therapy, which I did as well, and my spiritual teachers and mentors. And that's where I spent a lot of time, because it's very humbling. It's very humbling coming out of that experience. And you learn a lot about your nervous system, your mind, your body, and yourself, and how powerful you are.
I agree with that 100%. It threw me for a loop.
Yeah.
I was always spiritual. I've always had encounters, experiences, but this one was just like, first, oh my God, I died. Where the heck did I go?
Yeah.
And I remember even when I brought it back with even the doctors, they just said, call psych, call mental health. They didn't want to hear what I had to say. That I feel, or maybe it is actually changing.
It's slowly changing, but not.
But it needs to. In a moment, like I could have used some real guidance in that moment where I was like, "Where did I go?" I was just with someone. It was like holy, and then it got bypassed. Oh my God, I died. So it was nuts. And then I felt at that moment afterwards. So if anybody's listening, it is really difficult to come out of a near-death experience and just kind of go back into normal life. And, I went with friends and I said, listen, I went somewhere, and they're like, where? I'm like, I don't know, and that's when I started like really going, hey, I was not in this body. I was not here anymore.
Yeah.
And they also didn't get it. So they were like, well, I don't know,
Yeah.
It's like,
it's very isolating.
It's extremely isolating. But at the same time, it's liberating.
Yes.
When you do the research and go through all of that and learn about what really happened to you, me, and many other people in this world, it's like, wow. It's like someone just turned on the light. It honestly feels like that sometimes.
Absolutely.
Crystal, you are so, so amazing to me. And I feel like I could literally sit and pick your brain, honestly. You've taken this experience and you turned it into something others can access. And I was hoping that you can share services, any published works that you have, and where people can find you.
Absolutely. So you can find a lot of my work in the SoulPod app. So this is structure that I built for the awakening journey. So I like to understand where you're at in your spiritual journey so that we can place you with the most effective breath work, guidance, mantra in some cases, and ultimately empower you to be able to access that state for yourself at will. That's the intention of SoulPod. So you can find us at www.soulpodapp.com. You can find us on the iOS App Store. And you can also find me on Substack, where I'm also a writer. So I like to write each week about what I'm feeling as far as the messages of upliftment that we may need at that time. And we're starting to put on some workshops and other things, so stay tuned for that. But those are the best places to find us.
In your opinion, Crystal, do you feel that humanity is waking up spiritually?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And just as with an NDE experience, that constriction that difficulty, that intensity precedes a breakthrough, a shift in understanding, that you just can't go back after it. And so I think we're very much at a precipice of multiple aspects of our reality shifting at one time. That's what my guides have also said. And that's why there are beings of various levels of advancement, but all very benevolent, that are open to helping us and to mentoring us as a species as we move forward in the next, especially the next few decades. And so I very much feel like, there's always change that's inherent to this reality, but there's something very special about right now. And I think the biggest change that I don't know as if we are not talking about enough, is us realizing that we're interdimensional. That realization comes from the awakening process. And so that's really what we're being asked to realize about who it is that we are. And once we start to realize that truly for each individual, everybody plays a role in that, then everything that we create with, that we have created on this planet, is going to shift. Because just like with NDE, you can't go back. Your life changes. And I think that's what's happening at a collective level.
It's happening a lot. There are so many people experiencing NDEs. Blow your mind. So because you're on the return, we have a signature question.
Love it.
And what would the return be without a signature question, right? So everyone returns with a truth. What truth did you return with that you would want humanity to know right now?
I would want humanity to know that we're not just this body. I would start there. What does it mean? What does it mean for you to sit with that truth? That you are not just your body. That it's simply a vessel for experience. And that you are beyond space and time. I think that would be the one thing.
Crystal, what you shared here today is more than a story. I feel it's an invitation to see beyond the surface of this life. And I want to thank you from my heart to yours for your openness, your courage, and for bringing your light and your truth to the return today.
Thank you so much. This has been beautiful.
And to all of those listening and watching, let this be a gentle reminder. The way you see life shapes the way you live it. So here's a quiet takeaway for you to sit with. What would you shift in your life if you truly understood how much more there is beyond what you can see? And until next time, stay open, stay curious, and keep returning to the truth within.